Today we're going to talk about a movie from 1985 called The Dungeonmaster. The plot to this movie is total garbage, but it does have a redeeming quality. There's lots of special effects. In particular, this movie is filled with magic and laser effects, which I always thought looked really cool, the way they used to do them from the 1960s into the 1980s. Then, of course, Hollywood started doing everything with computers. An early example of the kind of special effects I'm talking about would be the famous wizard's duel between Boris Karloff and Vincent Price in The Raven. The whole scene is full of those type of effects. But many of you may be a little young to remember that movie. A somewhat more modern example would be the intro to most of the big 80s cartoons back in the day, like He-Man, Thundercats, Muppet Babies, you name it. A great example of the exact effect I mean is the scene from Transformers the movie where Megatron is transformed into Galvatron. The entire sequence was animated in this style. Ever since I was a kid, I wondered, how the heck did they make it look like that? Now, I'm no expert on the subject, but from what I understand, they used a process called rotoscoping. A rotoscope is like a device that allowed individual frames from a movie to be projected onto an animation table. It could be used to trace people, like in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or it could be used to create other effects, such as magic and lasers. They'd draw the shape they wanted onto cells, frame by frame, and paint it the desired color, and then the rotoscope would ensure that the drawings on the cells were aligned properly with the action. Cells were sometimes backlit to make it glow, and other times they used a diffuser that was put over the camera lens to get a blur around the edges. Then these cells were filmed frame by frame. After that, the animation was then composited together with the original live-action footage in an optical printer, and that's a camera setup that focuses on an individual frame in the gate of the projector to obtain the final result. It's a bit complicated, but to anybody who ever wondered how they got all those lasers in the Transformer cartoons, that's essentially how that was accomplished. To me, the magic that you see used in pre-CGI films was literally magic, movie magic. You looked at it in awe because you had no idea how such a thing could be done. Today, with modern movies, there's no sense of wonder at how the visual effects artists work, because you just know it was all done with a computer. There's your answer, just some computer program that does it. Anyhow, the whole point is, these effects are what attracted me to this movie. The basic plot is that there's this guy named Paul, and he's a computer nerd, and his brain is connected to a computer system called Excalibrate. Paul also has a girlfriend named Gwen, and she gets a bit jealous at how much time Paul spends with the computer.
How did I fall for a guy whose first love is a machine?
Hey, he can't link up the way we can.
You know, Excalibrate can't stick his cable into her USB port. He can't upload onto her interface. He can't... Alright, I'll stop. Anyway, one night they're both randomly whisked away to some hellish fantasy arena where they meet Mestima, the film's bad guy. Mestima is played by Richard Mole, most famous for being the dumb bailiff on the TV sitcom Night Court. Mestima is immortal, and he's getting bored with everlasting life. So, just for fun, he's playing a game with them. Mestima gives Paul 7 challenges, and if he passes all of them, he and Gwen will be set free. By the power of Grayskull! So Paul's computer is turned into an armband that can shoot lasers, and that's his form of defense throughout the trials. Trial number 1. The first challenge has Paul fighting a stone giant who looks like something right out of a Ray Harryhausen movie. And that's no surprise, given that this is the work of David Allen, a former Harryhausen employee and stop-motion animator. You might already know his work. He did animation in the 1970 film Equinox, and he also animated the aliens in Laser Blast. I guess this would be a good moment to point out, The Dungeonmaster was a team effort. Each trial is its own story, and each one had a different director. It's the same way that Twilight Zone the movie was produced. Trial number 2 has Paul battling a horde of deathly fiends. The makeup work here is actually pretty well done, and if the character design here looks familiar, that's because it was done by the same director who made Troll. And while the makeup effects on the zombies look cool, the scene has some of the worst dialogue in the whole movie.
I reject your reality and I substitute my own.
Ugh, what crappy writing. Well, what do you expect from the guy that directed Troll? It could be worse, though. It could have been the guy who directed Troll 2.
Oh my God!
Here's trial number 3, and it was directed by the godfather of shellac, Charles Band. It has Paul trying to save Gwen from a heavy metal rock band called Wasp. Wasp was actually a real shock metal group who were big back in the mid-80s. To get out of this one, Paul turns the settings on his armband to disrupt the music and zaps all the members of the band. With trial number 4, Paul and Gwen visit a sort of wax museum where notorious figures from history are all stored, frozen, waiting to thaw.
My hands are freezing. I can't feel a thing.
I've fallen and I can't get up! The gallery includes such infamous villains as the Wolfman, the Mummy, Jack the Ripper, and Albert Einstein?
Oh my God, that's Einstein.
What's he doing in a room full of villains? Imagine what Einstein would say if he ever saw this movie at the video rental store. Okay, now we're at trial number 5. Still with me? In this one, Paul has to stop a murderer from killing Gwen in under an hour. The police mistakenly think that Paul is the murderer because they find him standing over a dead body in an alley. They arrest him, put the cuffs on him, and haul his ass to jail, which is unfortunate because Paul is strapped for time, having to save his girlfriend in just an hour.
So what are you supposed to be in that outfit? Gumby?
Wonder where Pokey is.
I'm at home, officer. Fucking your wife. Paul eventually tracks down the killer who's after Gwen, and once he touches her, the trial ends, and then they're teleported back to Mistima's arena. But the killer keeps slashing at them even though they've disappeared. If you just saw somebody disappear right before your eyes, wouldn't you be kind of scratching your head, wondering what just happened? But he just keeps slashing away at him like a mindless buffoon. And then in trial number 6, there's a cave beast that's throwing crystals at Paul that blow up and cause rocks to tumble down. Well, the creature makes this challenge really simple because he destroys the rocks over his head and kills himself. What a dumbass. The final challenge is a car race that ends up in a fiery explosion. Then Paul's brought back to the arena to face judgment from Mistima, but instead he challenges him to hand-to-hand combat. Mistima agrees, and shortly after, he's thrown into a pool of lava. It's as cliched as it gets. The Dungeonmaster ends with a credit sequence that identifies which directors worked on which segments. I don't know about you, but if I was one of these directors, I might not be so proud of slapping my name on this thing. Each segment is entirely its own thing, and it leaves you feeling like there was no purpose to anything that happened. There's not much that really connects it all to make it work. In short, the effects are a lot of fun, but the plot and the characters really suck. This is another film that's yet to make it to DVD or Blu-ray. And you know what? In all seriousness, it's got some really nice Ray Harryhausen style work, and I think it deserves a wider release. So anyway, if you're ever able to, give it a watch.